Hi, guys. This is Carrie with Fullerton Professional Organizing. And on this podcast, we declutter our faith, declutter our home, and declutter our business. And today we have a Faith Friday guest, and she's going to introduce herself and talk about her testimony and her ministry and what she does. And I'm just going to go ahead and let her get started.
Well, thank you for having me today. And I'm Ann Wooten, and I am a ex-accountant for 50 years till God called me about 3 years ago to start, for some reason, started writing. I think it's just part of the healing journey.
Mhm.
And I'm now, that has evolved into Christian life coaching, and I'm a published author of two books now.
Mhm.
And I'm also a blogger and a musician,
Oh,
trying to dabble into songwriting and teaching myself the acoustic guitar along the way.
oh.
So, it was a change
Mhm.
going from the corporate world into accounting, or I mean, into coaching and writing.
Mhm.
But that's where you have to say, give God your yes. And then afterwards, he usually
Mhm.
will always reveal the next steps. Not immediately,
Mhm.
I have found out, but gradually. And well, he made us in our own image, so he knows what our sanctification journeys are going to be about, and that's great.
Mhm.
But I had received Christ when I was young, at
Mhm.
a young age, and but when you receive it, even know Christ that age, you can't comprehend
Mhm.
what it's all about.
Mhm.
And it's like anything else. We are going to make mistakes along the way, and we are going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
And
Well,
my story,
sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
I also have realized that just from my own journey, because I've been in church my whole life, went to Bible school, thought I knew. I mean, I knew I didn't know everything because I was raised in church and they tell us that too, that we
Hmm.
know it all. But I really generally thought I pretty much had a grasp on the Bible. But when you go through things little by little, you start seeing the stuff that you know in a totally different light. I mean, you know it, but you don't, when you're raised in it, the depth of it kind of skips over you. I heard someone say that, when they received Christ, they were not raised in church, so they knew they needed Christ. And then
Hmm.
when you're raised in church, you don't know the depths of everything you know. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted there.
No, that's fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you're right, because when you don't understand the depth of it and you don't let yourself understand, those are the times when I can kind of call it backslidden. And
Mhm.
what I mean by backslidden is we just take our eyes off Jesus at those times, or God, if you want to say it that way. And that's what happened with me. When I did that, I was the ultimate people pleaser, the ultimate perfectionist. And when you're a people pleaser, you become codependent.
Mhm.
And you become codependent on others to receive the affirmations. Because as humans, our DNA, we want to know that we are affirmed or we are valid. We want to receive that immediate validation.
Mhm.
And from God, faith with God is saying, I want you to trust me. I'll give it to you, but I want your faith to grow so you
Mhm.
receive it in that perfect timing. So we look for that validation
Mhm.
in the wrong places, and we become so codependent on those others, and we place high expectations on them and ourselves, and because we strive for the perfection. I mean, I did it in my work, and I did it with others because I would look to them, my friends, because I wanted to make sure they were happy, everything was all right, everything was cool. But what I did, God was not in the center of those friendships
Mm-hmm.
at those times. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that God wasn't in it at all,
Right.
but during those times,
Mm-hmm.
um, God was not. And when He's not, you're only hurting yourself when you do that
Mm-hmm.
because we cannot control anyone else's actions, their behavior, their
Mm-hmm.
words. And that was a hard lesson to learn because I was always blaming it on them when things didn't go my way. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what does that happen? Resentment, bitterness creeps in. And if you don't recognize that, and you don't want to do anything about it, the anxiety, worry, doubt, you're going to feel unloved, you're going to feel alone, you're going to feel like you're never good, you're not good enough for God, and you're going to strive to earn God's love instead of receiving it.
That's what I was doing, not knowing that that's what I was doing because I really did want to please him. But when things started crashing around me, I was like, God, I've served you my whole life. Why is this happening? What did I do? What did I do? What do I do? And then I felt like a failure. And God says, you're not a failure. You just have to continue to depend on me.
And what I didn't have, and when you don't recognize it and when you don't choose to recognize it, there's a choice because we all have a choice.
Yes.
During those times, I would say my faith was on more than it was off. But
Mhm.
when each time you go through and something would trigger something from those past experiences,
Mhm.
later in life, those times got longer. They
Mhm.
got more intense. At least they did with me
Mhm.
because God was trying to make them more intense. He was allowing it. He didn't make it. He
Right.
allowed it to happen because he wanted me to acknowledge and grasp
Mhm.
what was causing it.
Mhm.
Well, I chose to bury it. And
Mhm.
when you choose to bury it, when you that type of fear comes in, we create barriers to protect ourselves because our brains tell us to.
Mhm.
And our mindset is triggered by our inner critic.
Mhm.
And we all have them. And the inner critic and our brains are they're wired for
Mhm.
survival. And that's good in the physical sense to
Mhm.
warn us of the danger. But when you're talking about your spiritual walk, your faith, that is going to it's going to create lies. And when it creates one lie, it's going to create another lie. And the devil is just going to shoot those fiery darts
Yeah.
and you become in this spin cycle. And
Sit
so we have to,
and lie.
yeah, we just keep spinning and we
Mhm.
never take care of it. And
Mhm.
that's what happened to me. And in 2019, that's when I went through 8 or 9 months
Mhm.
and I went to work.
Mhm.
I kept up that because I kept the striving up to keep a job and keep the paycheck,
Mhm.
even though there were days I didn't want to show up.
Yeah.
But I stopped going to church. I stopped reading the Bible. I even stopped praying. I was a couch potato watching TV. And
Mm.
there's not really much to watch on TV, but I'd found something.
Yeah.
And I just kept buying into the lies, one thing after another. And it began to wreak havoc on me physically,
Mm.
spiritually,
Mhm.
emotionally, whatever. And God allowed it to get to a point where I actually said the word suicide to myself.
Mm.
Um, and when it got to that point, it was a wake up call.
Mm.
At least I'm so thankful I had enough faith to know that was not the answer and that
Right.
I needed to wake up. But God allowed me, I just had to get to that point because I had to get to that certain breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, and that was the start of how I understood I needed to confess what was causing this,
Mm-hmm.
what was happening. I still didn't want to say, I thought it would probably me being my own worst enemy, but I really wasn't ready to say yes to that. I was
Yeah.
beginning. It wasn't until God said, I want you to go and visit this church and get back into church. The second Sunday I visited, the pastor, the youth pastor was preaching that day, and he said, we 99% of the time, we can be our own worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. I heard it. I
Mm-hmm.
think I needed to hear it from somebody
Right.
else
And those are
before
those
I,
fiery darts. The enemy puts all of that in our minds, and because we haven't, I was just thinking about this weekend. Sometimes God is just an accessory. We wear him around our neck,
Mhm.
take him with us, but he's just an accessory. We're not, we have a relationship, but it's not deep. And so we let those fiery darts, because what changed my life, even though I knew the Bible, it was actually reading the Bible from front to cover myself. And then I really saw who God was, because the Bible's true whether we believe it or not.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
he says about us is true whether we believe it or not.
yeah,
But so go ahead
yeah,
and tell us exactly how.
yeah. So I've that's when I confess I joined the church that Sunday, and it was November of 2019.
Mhm.
And the next weekend, I had a lot of grievance against my mom, both of my parents, but in different ways, but
Mhm.
not harsh.
Yeah.
They loved me. I had a pretty good
Yeah.
relationship, but I wanted things to be different, and I just refused to say anything about it to
Mhm.
them because I was a little afraid to growing up. But that day, both of them had passed on, so I went to their gravesite. I live about an hour away from where I grew up. And so I just drove there, and I knew that I needed to confess my part in it and repent to receive God's forgiveness. But I
Mhm.
knew that I needed to take care of me and
Mhm.
my connection with God
Yes.
before I could ask Him, or even if my parents were still alive, my mother, to say, I forgive you. I'm sorry. Would you receive my apology
Mhm.
and forgive me? So I took care, it was kind of, and that day, now that I think about it, nearly almost 6 years later,
Mhm.
that day has become, I call it a triangle of forgiveness because I
Mhm.
need to ask God to forgive me of my resentment that caused my sinfulness. But
Mhm.
also, I was also hard on myself knowing that I shouldn't do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I had to ask God to for help me forgive myself because it's important to give
Mhm.
yourself grace.
Mhm.
And when those two barriers of the triangle are lifted, then that your connection with God is a lot stronger. And I believe that He will enable you if you make want to take the make if you've got the choice and
Mhm.
you're really serious about it, you ask God to forgive the other person
Yeah.
because you're going to have enough faith and your connection is going to be strong. You got to take care of yourself first
Yes.
because
Yeah.
and that has,
Perfectionism is an enemy of ourselves,
yeah.
because
And
we're always going to fail. Therefore, we're always going to feel like a failure.
yeah. So it is important to take care of your connection first before you're able to love, receive his love, or even give that agape love in
Mhm.
service to him through to others.
Mhm.
So I felt forgiven and redeemed on the drive home, but it's like like everyone, we love that it's tangible. You
Mm-hmm.
know, as humans, we love those tangible signs. But although faith says we walk by faith and not by sight or our feelings, so we don't. But God bless his, bless him. When I pulled into my subdivision afterwards, there was a rainbow over the entire subdivision, and
Mm-hmm.
tears just flowed. That was the first time, and I rededicated my life again to Christ that day. And not because of that, I did
Yeah,
it
you
before
just
that,
knew
but
that
that was
God
a
was speaking to
tangible.
you. Yeah.
I couldn't believe it because I know that that's God's covenant, his promise to know that I'm forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
And that started the journey forward. And then I started writing. God introduced me to a community and an online community. And through that, I learned about creative writing. And I hated creative writing or anything to do with it when I was young going through school. I just I just didn't like it, but he introduced it to me, I believe, especially poetry,
Mm-hmm.
because as a way of healing.
Yes.
Because there were still other areas that needed to be healed,
Mm-hmm.
but the first one that started it that started the journey ahead, was done, and I'm thankful for that because that led me to start the blog in June of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
That really helped me know how to become transparent and to share and to not be afraid.
Right.
And through that, then I wanted to understand what was the kind of like what would be. I continued the writing, and then in 2023, there was things going on. I'm still working full time, and there was some things going on at work. I could tell there were changes within
Yeah.
the company. It was a large company with multiple divisions,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew the division I was working in was more one of the shakier ones. I knew if anything was going to happen, it would happen in my division. And when you
Mm-hmm.
see, we had a tight-knit group. We were all Christians that worked
Awesome.
together, the five of us especially on
Yeah.
our specific team. And so when you see the manager of all of us give their resignation, when
Um,
resigned, and then 2 weeks later, the other senior member on the team gave their resignation. I was the third senior member,
um,
and I knew that it was going to, if I worked, I would be ended up working 50, 60-hour work weeks. And I'd done that before. I couldn't do it again. And I knew that writing had been healing. That was all I knew. I
mm-hmm.
had no idea what God wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I couldn't stand the stress. And it got to the point where if you know God is calling you to do something, and my faith had been growing during this time. And
Mm-hmm.
when it gets to up here and you
Mm-hmm.
can't hardly breathe, it gets so intense.
Mm-hmm.
God is calling your attention to make a decision that
Yeah.
He wants you to make.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what to do, but I knew that I had to say yes to receive peace. And that was His peace. And that peace was and all it means when peace with God is being even more reconciled with Him.
Right.
That's
Being
really,
aligned with what
yes,
he wants and just knowing that. Yes.
yeah.
Because sometimes, yeah, because I kind of sort of not really went through the same situation when I started my business that I'm doing now. I had to quit my full-time job, but it wasn't me quitting it. Well, in some ways it was because they eliminated my position. So I had to
Mhm.
decide whether I was going to take another position or start a business.
Yeah.
And I chose to start the business. And then you know how it is. I was busy from the day I put it out there, but as soon as my full-time job ended, it dried up until a few months later. But
Yeah.
God was still in it, but that's when you start going, oh, oh, what did I do?
Yeah, but even before that, the stress from me,
Yes.
the inner critic works overtime telling you, no, you want to, that's not the right decision, but the
Mm-hmm.
inner critic, when you're faced with making what God has called you to make a decision for, and it's a scary transition,
Mm-hmm.
but we change from one day to the next, even though we don't realize, even though
Mm-hmm.
we don't think about it, but we're one day older. So changes it it's time.
Yes.
We change with time. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, what I felt was the stress and everything, and the inner critic working, telling me, no, don't do it because I want you to be scared, because I want you to work and I want you to be exhausted so you don't do what God's called you to do.
Exactly.
Simply put. And the only way to defeat the inner critic is with God's word.
Yes.
That is the only way to do
The
it.
truth will set you free.
Yep. And his promises are true.
Yes.
And so I made the decision, and immediately, when you make a decision, of course, I asked God, well, what next?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want me to do? And but I felt a peace that surpasses that understanding. The
Right.
stress was gone because I knew when I said yes, and people don't exactly understand that. And I said, it's not for them to understand, it's between you and God.
Mm-hmm.
And but you've got to be strong enough in your faith to realize that.
Yes.
And so I went on about the journey, and God began. I left, I gave my notice, and what God was teaching me, I think, between then and now, was to trust Him for every provision, whether it was financial or roof
Dependence.
over my head,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, the food, transportation, and I haven't gone home. I'm still here. Um, and I'm glad that He's done that because it's made my faith even more strong, more bold. And I did not have the clarity right at the only thing I had was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened in June. In, I would say sometime in August, I got an email, and it was about somebody. I went to a conference, a writing conference, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the speakers there, I started following, and
Mm-hmm.
she offered a beta writing course.
Mm-hmm.
And so through that, I still understood more about the writing entrepreneurship. And some of them were coaches. And
Uh,
I'm like, I never thought about it. So the word
yeah.
coach, as soon as that happened, this is how God will open doors if you follow him and let him
Yes.
and be obedient. I received a private message from my cousin with a person's name and contact information. And it took me a few days to make sure it wasn't scam or spam or whatever.
Right.
And so I did, and it's led me to my coach, who I'm still working with now. She helped me, and that has now been central in helping me even more grow. And so she's like, your story, Anne, is whom I believe you are to help others with.
Yes.
And that
Absolutely.
is the story about the people pleasing, about the codependency, but you have to understand what that is.
Yes.
And it's also, I hadn't needed to learn how that inner critic, how our brain works,
Mhm.
exactly even more about fear. But during that, I also understood that what was lacking, and it's not talked about a whole lot, was the fear of God.
Mm.
Because the fear of God, I believe for me, is
Mhm.
a sustaining factor of my foundation, of just the foundation of my faith,
Mhm.
because it helps you to keep that eternal perspective.
Mhm.
Because it ought to, if you have the fear of God, you have that deep desire to never want to be separated from Him. And
Mhm.
that's really what it means.
Yeah.
You have that unyielding desire for that.
Yes, for his
And when you,
presence in your life.
yeah, and when you
Not
do,
just an accessory, but his presence. Hmm.
yeah, it allows you and it empowers you enough alone to surrender in obedience
Hmm.
to him. And obedience is key because that allows us to open the door to trust his will and him guiding the steps ahead.
Yeah.
I loved Jesus with all my heart and I knew about the fear of God. I just, those times when I failed, the fear of God was not, and the eternal perspective, I
Hmm.
did not have, or I chose not to have.
Right, right.
And that is essential to know what to be in awe of God and his almighty power and reverence. That is the only thing that gets me up each morning.
Yeah.
But it's not a one and done thing. It
Mhm.
is a daily walk. So
And a renewing of
God,
the mind daily.
yeah, and it's like God has now asked me through all of this to help others learn about the inner critic,
Hmm.
learn about the mindset, learn more about the fear, why it's another stronghold, but understand why that faith has to be the foundation that unlocks us. And it's not a one-time thing, but I've got the inner critic reset is what I call it.
Hmm.
And it's about to learn that. You've got to learn, you need to understand the scientific and also the biblical aspect of it. You've got
Yeah.
to learn what both of them are to educate. And so that's one thing I like to bring people in and let them know about. But
Hmm.
more than that, it's like for the person who feels defeated, because when you get in that continuous cycle that we
Yeah.
talk about, you're gonna, and you let the inner critic go in overtime
Hmm.
and you stay there, you're
Hmm.
going to be continuously feeling defeated. And defeated encompasses so much, you
Hmm.
know, unloved, unworthy, alone, doubt, I'm not good enough. You name it. It's
Yeah.
there. But
Yes.
we need to go from there to learn how to walk
Hmm.
daily with Christ in freedom with our identity in him.
Yeah.
And that is what that's what I want to help people with. And it's mostly people that are in, because some type of transition will sometimes cause you to go backwards,
Hmm.
um, or not to make that decision like I did. But we
Hmm.
have to understand that when we give God our yes, we're not going to immediately know
Hmm.
what that clarity is. The confirmation is just if you've got a strong enough faith
Hmm.
and you know God is asking you to trust him, your faith will grow
Yeah.
afterwards.
Hmm.
But it's a daily walk with being in his word, being in prayer. And when I'm talking about being in his word, you got to study it.
Yes. Yes. You got
And
to
it's not just necessarily reading it.
what it
You need to
means.
study it, meditate on it, and see how he wants it to apply to your life.
Hmm.
Because I want to help people understand when they walk through this and they get to the other side where freedom exists. They learn what their spiritual gifts are. They
Hmm.
learn to write their testimonies. They use that within their communities, how God wants them to do, to
Yeah.
be a part of the global impact to further his kingdom.
Right. Well, that's
That's
excellent. Excellent. And yes, it is so needed because it's what I have walked through just recently. So I know it's needed because sometimes we don't even know, especially for me, being in church my whole life, I didn't know it until I went through something crushing that that's what I needed. So it is needed. Now, only because we're running out of time, but let us know how we can find you on the internet. And then, of course, I'm going to put all of that in the description and we'll say goodbye for now. And maybe we'll have you come back again sometime.
okay. Well, you can find all about me, my books, my free resources. Um, it's if you just go to my website at www.ann with an E
Mm-hmm.
wooten.com, and it's going to have everything there because everything that I've written, everything that I'm coaching,
Mm-hmm.
you'll get to learn more about me there and what God's called me to do. And what I want to say is to that one listener, that one viewer
Yes.
that maybe hear this message, it's never too late. You're not too old.
Mm-hmm.
And there is not going to be a perfect time
Mm-hmm.
because God calls the unqualified.
Mm-hmm.
He calls, He will, if He's called you to do that, He will equip you.
Mm-hmm.
And He wants you to be consumed by the call. He wants you not to stop, to not to stay in your comfort zones,
Yes.
but He and stop being on the sidelines.
Yes.
And everything is so small because you can do it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's your choice. It's a commitment. But God would love to have your yes.
Yes. Trust
But
him and
just trust Him for the clarity afterwards, but not instant. So if you're hurting, reach out,
Mhm.
go to my website, and just
Mhm.
set and there's a link there just for a free call and let's talk.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for telling us your story. I love that. That's why I do what I do, is because I know that reading God's word works. I know that God is for you and not against you. And no matter what negativity comes into our heads, it's not the truth. And I appreciate that you came in and shared what you do with us today. And guys, go look at her website, her blog, her Facebook page. Do you have a
Yeah,
face?
everything's there on my website
Everything's
to
there.
connect with me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will see you on the next one. This one will be up on a Friday. I just can't remember right offhand if it's this Friday. It might be this Friday, but if not, next Friday. But I believe it'll be up by this Friday. So, all right. We will talk to you guys later.